be. Okay. So now, this is what's so shocking. Congratulations, your child is gifted. Now, so many times you forget, because you don't necessarily hear this all the time, your child is gifted. These are gifted characteristics. The whole gifted and talented and things like that. Well, wait a second. That may not be my student. I haven't really seen them on that. I can't believe that they're gifted. My student is, next. What is actually gifted? Children and youth with outstanding talent who perform or show the potential for performing at remarkably high levels of accomplishment when compared to others their age, experience, or environment. Does that say on there, specifically straight A student? It does not. And that's what gets confusing. That's where there's so many of the misconceptions that kind of come into play. Now, gifted is all about learning potential. Gifted children are not always high achievers. That is very hard to imagine. For instance, low self-esteem, problem with peer groups, trouble accepting responsibility for failure. I did not do it, it was the pencil. Trouble acknowledging facts of circumstances, denial of failure, poor test performance, achieving at or below grade level expectations in one or all basic skills, daily work frequently incomplete or poorly done, superior comprehension and retention of concepts. What is the rest of it? I'm sorry, what was that? So it's up to their selection. Again, with the selection. So, how do these students do in school? Well, some of them, it's above average achievement. Then those are the ones that are very much identified as gifted. When they're the overachievers, they don't even need to be told that there's homework. They're already doing homework. They've actually looked, they're their college buddies you even went to school with, that literally looked at the syllabus before class started. They're ready to go. Well, now what about the other ones? Then there's the struggling. They were tested because of the suspected disability. Because something's going on. When I talk to them, they're just fine. But why aren't they performing? There must be something wrong. And usually, the disability does kind of come out. But then it masks the giftedness. Then you've got your average achievement. Performs at the same level at the peers. The giftedness masks the disability. And the disability masks the performance. That's when you say, well, traditional education has really been fine for two of my students, but not for my other children. Because if they're able to just kind of maintain, they're maintaining. But there's got to be more than just maintaining, okay? So, gifted and learning disability, that can't be right. Who really would ever put that together? Seriously, it's very unusual in our thought processes, but it is. They're very similar. They can both happen at the same time. So it's an unusually advanced degree of general intellectual ability. A learning disability is a significant discrepancy between academic achievement and assessed intellectual ability. Therefore, a student who possesses an outstanding gift but also has areas of great relative weakness can be both gifted and have a learning disability. Now, this is what I want you to keep in mind every day. This is where Harbor is so different, because that's what we keep in mind every day. So when we say a Harbor student, that's a Harbor kid, that does not mean that there are problems. There are challenges, but that means they have a lot of this uniqueness of twice exceptional. And learning disability, remember, is a lot of different things. So students are gifted and they have another exceptionality referred to as twice exceptional. Now, what's fun is 2 to 5% of gifted students may also have learning disabilities. Remember how you always say, you always hear the different children, like ADHD, or you've got processing disorder, things like that. So in a lot of cases, even the teachers when they're being trained, you're looking at anywhere from 5 to maybe 15% of your class. The thing about Harbor is, we have all those 5 to 15%, all in one beautiful location. And so what is awesome about that is that's why suddenly it is amazing when you find your people. That's why work is so important whenever you get the job that you finally are fitting in. All of us have been in jobs, all of us have been in classes that we just didn't meld. That's part of it. So it's not just about the peers, it is also about the program, so that they understand wait a second, so you mean I'm exceptional? Not, and then the big R word that they're always used to, I've been called retarded, which is that is absolutely off anywhere of our scale. We don't allow them to say it about themselves or each other, we could imagine. Okay, I wanted to go ahead, if you could, thanks. High verbal ability, but extreme difficulty in written language. That doesn't mean they can't write their own incredible book. That is different than true communication. That is still in their own world, on their own terms, all on their own things. That's what it's hard, again, to compare it to. Same as when children are told, well, there's a focus issue. Well, I know he can sit and play games for 6 hours. Well, that's the hallmark of having an attention problem. It's, again, selective. If you're putting something in their way that requires their entire focus, their entire abilities, that's when you're going to see a problem. If it's something that's a little bit struggling for them. If they love it, then fine, but very little schoolwork is enjoyable for most of our kids. The ADD problems, but may stay focused for long periods of time in areas of interest. I'm willing to take risks in academic areas. This is huge, but will take risks in non-school areas without consideration for consequences. This is most of our children too. It is amazing how they're ready to just they have a new idea of what they're going to be every day. Every day with no limitations whatsoever. I've decided that I am going to be a race car driver next week. And how hard could it be? Well, you're right. Then it's we're going to write a poem. I'll never do that. Well, I just need 3 words. Oh, it's so hard, I can never do that. That's what starts throwing you off, because they're not fitting in these boxes that we're trying to get fit. Creative thoughts and ideas, but may appear to daydream when generating ideas. They're not with you. And that's okay for some of the time. But that's part of what we're trying to do is we start learning that these are the way that kids work. It is not always okay. So that's one of the things I want to make sure that you guys always realize. There are times that is not going to be okay. That is who it is. That's who you are. These are your challenges. But you're not allowed to daydream if you have a job that you're supposed to be watching security cameras. Chances are that is not the job for you. And that's what we start looking into as well. That's not going to be something. That they want to be a security because there's some of them that are just this, action-driven, crazed, and they just think, because of course, how hard could it be? Of course, I'm going to lead the entire security department. I'm going to be in the CIA. I don't need a college degree. I don't need math. I don't need anything. I'm just going to go straight in because I'm so fabulous at it. That's awesome. So we'll kind of tweak and work that a little bit. Now, gifted students, again, common complaints. The curriculum is not challenging. These are things that you're going to hear from before. They don't say it like this, okay? These are just things to keep in mind. The instructional pace is too slow. The information is repeated. You will hear that time and time again. That is the #1 complaint of gifted, exceptional students. Even when they don't know how to do it. And that's always amazing to parents. So even if they don't know how to do multiplication, and of course, what is multiplication but repetition, 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 and they just prove it to me that you know it, and you can go on. It is amazing how then they have the ability to want to do it. Because if they think it's an unending cycle, they're not going to want to do it. There are certain stages, though, that we have to say, well, there's some that are just repetition. The majority of curriculum is actually based on repetition. 20% of students truly need repetition. That's not very many, and that is hardly any of our Harbor students. We do, unfortunately, have a few that they do have to write their spelling words 10 times, but that's very rare. Most of our kids can write a few times. But keep this in mind, the vast majority must at least write it. There is something that's still very powerful in the entire neurological system that if it's here, they're looking at it, they can hear it, all kinds of touch it, whatever you want to tactile, blended learning say, it still comes down to they need to write vocabularies, they need to write flashcards, What is the key word there? Right. You don't have to read it. You don't have to know what it says. They have to know what it says. They need to know because it completes the process. If they write it incorrectly, they must then correct it. Why is that? Because if an answer is wrong, that's how they're remembering it, because they wrote it down wrong. That's why it's so critical to go back in. That's not repetition, that's learning it the right way. And that's where they start getting confused and start kind of being whiny with you. Well, I'm writing it over and over. No, you're not, because you're not paying attention and doing it right. It really does get back to that old, you do it right. Not necessarily the first time, but by the fourth time, we're really going to need a strike for you to get it right. It needs to be right so that then you can go on. And once it's right, once you're able to, then they can move on. That's really one of the reasons that kids have gotten so knocked in this rut, is they've been continuing to just, they get their papers back, it's wrong, they don't correct it. They're supposed to correct it on their own. How many of your children have ever corrected their paper without being told? It just doesn't happen. So, for whatever reason, it's not rebellion, it's just not realistic. And so, that's one of the reasons. So they're continuing to assume. How many students, too, will tell you, hey, how'd you do in math? Oh, I did great. I did great. I knew everything. You did no problem. And then they get fail. I thought you said you did good. Well, I thought I did. I was there. I was with it. It was positive. We were feeling it. It was fantastic. It's because they never went back in and corrected. They were doing it exactly right. Their right way that they did it 4 papers back. They didn't correct it. They didn't readjust and get into the right zone. That's why so many things are so critical. Because, again, we go back to the gifted. What are they having struggles with when it comes to a mistake? Admitting that there is a mistake on their part. So that's part of why they don't want to correct, because surely that was having to accept that I made a mistake. And that's part of what we just have to get them over. It's one of those things that it's not about how well you're doing. Who are you? Are you doing the best you can be? It's not about all of these other achievements where it ends up being. It's all about you doing it perfectly. It is about you learning it until you get it. Big difference. Okay, that is the emphasis of, I'm going to go back just 1 second, thanks. Emphasis of mastery of facts rather than thinking skills. Because that's one of the things is, it is a combination of both for these kids. They really need to make sure that they can think things through. You cannot memorize what you do not understand. And that's something that are very core things to our curriculum. Okay, now, thanks. Most of these are identified as gifted, and then these are the ones that are considered, when we looked at it before, what are these kids rated as? Some are rated as just gifted. Let's just say, oh, my son's in the Quest. It's just been fabulous. They're taking all AP classes. Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So they're identified as gifted, but they're struggling in school. Well, they're just not handing in homework. 9 times out of 10, when I start seeing that, they start out great, because the homework and all of the paperwork just starts getting so much. That's just not going to happen. Their academic achievement doesn't meet the expectation for gifted students, and then they start not fitting in the gifted student. Then what started out as to be what should have been taking care of their thrill to keep busy, to keep challenging without frustrating, then becomes a failure. Then they become, I'm stupid, it's me. Performance difficulties improperly attributed to poor self-concept, lack of motivation, or laziness. This is what happens. This is not just the students thinking that, okay? This is the entire system that begins to think this about the student. Because chances are they based it only on a great IQ moment. So even though there's a lot of different layers in assessing some of the quests, it still ends up being, if all the stars align beautifully, everything is great, then you're going to get a great IQ testing, everything's going to be great, they were in the mood to actually cooperate, They felt that you were not doing anything stupid or beneath them, so they'll go ahead and participate. And then they had a great IQ, and then somehow it's just not working. Okay, next. Now, the delivering disabled. Okay, there's an IEP for emotionally disabled. There's an ADHD. There is dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. There's severe sensory, which God knows we can't get an IEP for sensory because that's just not real to the traditional school systems. But they have the IEP. Their exceptional gifts are not recognized or properly addressed. That's done on the program because you have to choose one or the other because of the tracks. There's not a track for that. There's not money that's extra for that. That is not even considered in the IEP program because SPED, they end up, whether you're either SPED or you're entirely gifted. So those are the two, and that's what you're seeing. They're defined by what they can't do instead of what they can do. That's what makes parents withdraw from wanting to get a label. Well, no, because it's so negative. But then again, you don't really start taking care of the things that you need to. Okay, next. Now, then you've got your general classroom, the ones that you're hearing, well, you know, they're doing okay. They're holding their own. And that's what you've got. In general ed, they're considered to be average ability and not qualified for gifted or SPED. Their giftedness helps them compensate for the learning disabilities. So they've just been fine because they're enough to where they're just maintaining. They may even be a B. Oh, you know, it's fine. It's all of them. They're the ones that also you'll see the most. That's mostly that's actually a very, probably 60% of our children that come to Harbor are in this category. There are ones too that will say on the comments, does not apply herself. If she tries, she can do better. There are times, now see, then they suddenly make this incredible grade because they got interested in it. And they, again, had enough sleep, had a good breakfast, everything was going, they were happy that day, and actually thought, I'm going to bless you with my intellect today, and I'm going to do awesome. See, I told you you could do it. Look, see, you're 100. You made 100. I told you if you just did all this. It's not that. It's that they're trapped in here because they're in between. Two exceptionalities mask each other or cancel each other out. Okay, next. So I want you to make sure this is something that I want you to, because you're going to walk away saying, oh my gosh, my kid is gifted instead of my kid is a problem child. I promise you're going to. So, gifted students are good at everything. No. Gifted children are always mature, self-directed, and well-behaved. No. Gifted children don't need any extra help. They're smart enough to figure it out themselves. Oh, no. Formal assessments. That's how you get all this in. This is what you end up having to do. True. So not only are you looking at the IQ test, you're looking at the diagnostics achievement test, test of aptitude, test of creativity, and formal assessments. That's all of us just kind of really looking at those charts. I have horrid news for you in all of your IEPs. It won't be in the IEP. Even though it's this thick, that is not our definition of true individualized learning. That's really what it stands for. It's actually for your individualized plan. No, it's not individualized. It's choose one of the drop downs, and then the rest kind of farm out. So this is something to remember: the peer evaluations, parent interviews, auditions. This is in a performance situation, but it can also mean in just this is how they're doing it, and we're watching, we're observing how they do it. The common attributes are extremely uneven abilities. Their sophistication, perception, and insight that seems way beyond their years. They will have, and especially in spurts, where they come out with something that's the most uncanny thing you've ever seen in your entire life. It's where the savant starts coming in. But again, it is selective. I'm so sorry. Our job is to try to get it where it's not quite as selective all the time on their part, and that is part of where we try to work with them and you. All right, the next slide, please. Now, in some cases, this is what you're not seeing in a lot, but they have superior mathematic reasoning skill. They have a high abstract reasoning ability. You're not seeing that because of all the other slides before us. Okay, remember that. Everything hasn't lined up just right. But when you start getting